Mr. Chair, thank you for calling this urgently important meeting, and I also want to salute Mr. Meadows and Mr. Heiss for their thoughtful comments and support for a broad and robust congressional investigatory power and the central importance of document production in the exercise of that power. I want to welcome all of our witnesses today, especially Mr. Borden, who is a distinguished former student of mine, a prize pupil from the late 20th century, and I can't tell you his grades because of the privacy laws, Mr. Chairman, but maybe another member in the committee will ask him for some more document production on that.
If I can interrupt the distinguished gentleman at freezing his time, the one thing Mr. Borden didn't fess up to was that he was a former student of yours.
I noted he gave a very detailed autobiography, but he excluded that point. But I don't want to compromise his objectivity. But we never agreed politically, but I always found him to be intellectually very engaged and astute. Mr. Chairman, you and the chairman of the full committee and Mr. Meadows, I think, have made the central point about these hearings, which is that Congress has a broad, robust, and comprehensive power that's been recognized by the Supreme Court and all the courts to investigate. And that is essential to representative democracy. I think it was James Madison who made the crucial point when he said, "Those who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives." And that power, which belongs to the American people, has been vested in the Congress of the United States through the Constitution. We exercise the power of the people to obtain knowledge about whatever it is we want to legislate about. And so it is indeed up to us to determine what we're going to legislate about. And so it's up to us to determine what information we're going to get. And that demonstrates the absolute importance of complete compliance with the document requests of Congress. Now, I want to tell you a story about our Constitution, and I could proceed Socratically, Mr. Borden, if you want to answer the questions, or else I could do it as a little lecture. But there are two provisions in the Constitution I want to focus on. One is the Foreign Emoluments Clause, which is in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, which simply says that everybody in this room and everybody on the floor of Congress and the President of the United States may not collect a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office or a title from a king, a prince, a foreign government of any kind whatever, without the consent of Congress, okay? And we went for more than 2 centuries with anybody coming close to creating a problem under the Foreign Emoluments Clause. You know, there were presidents who got saddles for horses. There were presidents who were given a Persian rug. All of them came directly to Congress and said, "Can I keep this or not?" And Congress either said, "Yeah, you can keep it," or "No, it's a little bit too valuable. Turn it over to the State Department or make a deposit with the U.S. Treasury." There's another clause called the Domestic Emoluments Clause, which is Article 2, Section 1, Clause 17, which says that the president may not receive any emolument from the United States or any of the states beyond his salary compensation. And we can't increase the president's salary, and we can't decrease the president's salary, and he can't get $1 more from a federal government or agency. Now, the story all changes with the presidential election of 2016 and the inauguration of President Trump, who made a decision not to divest himself of any of his businesses and not to put anything into a blind trust. And since then, there have been reports that 24 different foreign governments have spent money at different Trump enterprises, hotels, office tower, golf courses, and so on. In 2019 alone, 17 officials of foreign governments stayed at the Trump Hotel just in Washington, D.C., from 13 different nations, including Eduardo Bolsonaro, a Brazilian congressman and the son of the Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro. Also, the engineer of Brexit and the leader of the British UKIP party, Nigel Farage, and an official from the administration of Filipino President Duterte. Kuwait, the Kuwaiti embassy spent between $50,000 and $60,000 there on a National Day celebration, and so on. So the money is flowing in from foreign governments to the Trump Hotel, and President Trump continues to collect money from the Trump Hotel as well as the office tower and the other hotels. Now, that hotel has a deal with the U.S. government through the General Services Administration for the old post office building, which is federal property. And they've got a lease. In the lease is a provision which I hope is boilerplate. It should be if it's not, but I assume it is boilerplate, which just says that no government official, no matter how high, U.S. government or local in the District of Columbia, can derive any value or benefit from the lease. That's an echo of the constitutional prohibition on foreign and domestic emoluments. And yet we know all of this money has been flowing into the administration. Mr. Borden, is it GSA's position that any of the committee's requests about the lease with the Trump organization do not serve a legitimate legislative purpose?
No, sir.
Well, why is the GSA making arguments that are also being advanced by the president's personal attorneys that we can't obtain information about a government lease, a very valuable property which is controlled, owned by the U.S. taxpayers, the old post office building?
Yes, sir. I believe we're talking about the financial summaries and audit documents and so forth that are produced to GSA under the lease. And the top line message I want to leave with you on that is that there are no documents that we're not willing to talk about producing to the committee and working through the accommodation process. With regards to those financial documents, there, and as in many of our arrangements with our business partners, there's a confidentiality provision, and the confidentiality provision says that these documents aren't to be produced outside of GSA without.
It says they may not be turned over to the United States Congress?
I'm going to have to interrupt the gentleman.
It doesn't reference the Congress.
You may finish, Mr. Borden.
It doesn't reference the Congress at all. It does reference FOIA, and it's probably a weakness in that provision that's not in there. What it does say is that with the consent of the tenant, we can do it, or if it's required by law. And we are trying to work through the process of figuring out whether we can, under what terms we can provide those to the committee.
So you,
in reference to the legitimate legislative purpose, when we sought the tenant's consent, that was a question that was posed to us, and we were bringing it back to the committee. It's not our place to answer it for you. For this committee, I know very well, Rule 10, Clause 4C, I believe, is quite broad and should be an easy question to answer.